Marcus Horan and Mick Galwey, thanks very much for joining us. How are you getting on, lads?
Good now.
All good, yeah. Good to see you, boys.
Mick, how's the lockdown been treating you?
Yeah, it's different. It's certainly different, but it's it is what it is, I suppose. Thank God we have the good weather. But you kind of get sick of replays and sick of you don't know what day of the week you have. But sure, that's where we're at. There's a long weekend coming up, and it's no different than the other weekends,
Yeah. They're all melding into one at this stage.
Yeah.
Oh, it is bizarre though. Like there have been a few times I've had to check what day of the week it is, which is funny the first couple of times, and it's kind of not. It's not a great sign either. Marcus, how about you?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's trying to work from home, and we've young kids trying to homeschooling as well. So yeah, you talk about bank holidays. I've never counted so many bank holidays. You know when they're coming, and then you realise you can do nothing about it. So it is bizarre. But look, we're getting through it. We're nearly there.
Are you homeschooling the kids, Marcus?
God help them.
I'm standing over them threateningly to make them finish the homework. That's my homeschooling.
God help. You're right, Gallup.
My mother was a teacher, so I've a good teacher in my mother. So she was tough on me, so I've followed on suit.
Well, they're very good at sport anyway, so they'll probably be okay long term.
Tell me, Marcus, just from your own point of view, you're obviously a player development manager with Rugby Players Ireland, looking after the Munster boys. It's a very uncertain time for a lot of guys who might have been coming off contract and who ordinarily would have found something somewhere else, but now just because none of the clubs know where they are financially and none of the leagues know where they're at with regard to the calendar, a lot of guys are kind of in limbo at the moment. How difficult is it for those guys who were coming off contract?
Yeah, look, it's very difficult. I suppose you could categorise a few guys in different groups. There's a few guys that have said, look, they're retiring and they're moving on completely. So even finding work in the current economic climate is going to be tough. But then for those rugby guys who are looking to continue playing rugby somewhere else, as you're all aware, the clubs in England, especially the first division over there, are not hiring. And France is probably the same at the moment, complete lockdown. They're trying to keep what they have. And then you've got guys who just want to try and, get something somewhere, and then, with the view to coming back. And while Japan and the USA are probably hiring, a lot of our guys don't feel like it's a pathway back to top professional rugby in Europe. So, you have to cut your cloth in what you want to do. And they're big decisions, especially for some of our young guys who maybe might be leaving the academy or development squads, that they've got to make that decision. If they go further afield, the chances of coming back this direction it lessens their chances.
Marcus, in terms of the player welfare side of it, how have you found that the players are dealing with? Because obviously it's a stressful time for everyone. But with rugby being stopped, and I suppose we're starting to see a bit of a roadmap back. But in the height of it, when there was so much uncertainty, did you find a lot of players reaching out and struggling?
Yeah, look, there would be. You know yourself, Fla. We were all creatures of habit. When you take people's routine away, and you've kind of restructure your day, it's very difficult for the lads. So yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the pluses for me is I've had fellas engaging with us who normally wouldn't. And look, you might say it took a crisis for fellas to do that, but like our thing is we're always there. And if a guy feels that he's stressed out by what's happening, and he reaches out for support, that's what we're trying to encourage. But we cover that across so many areas. So for example, like obviously the mental health side of things is really, really important. Dealing with anxiety, dealing with uncertainty. So we've done a lot around that space, and we'll be doing a lot more about the uncertainty of maybe moving back into rugby again. So because that's another transition for the lads. But there's other things around finance. The lads were on a pay deferral, so talking and connecting them to financial advisors on dealing with mortgage payments and stuff like that. From education, we have a few lads that were finishing their courses in UL and in UCC, and it all went online, so supporting them. So a lot of them are just finished up now. And then we have a few guys who are actually looking to take on something now in this space. So look, there's a silver lining with everything. If these guys start preparing for the inevitability of retirement, please God, a lot of them won't have to pull the trigger on that for another few years. but at least they'll be prepared. At least they'll have the groundwork done. So that's the one benefit that's coming out of it from our point of view.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a silver lining to it, and I suppose the tricky thing, I know you've told me in the past, is when you go into a group of players are only concerned with what's happening that week and possibly the next week. So when you're trying to talk to them about preparing for something that's going to happen in 5-6 years, that it just goes over their heads. But this has made everyone sort of sit down and reflect. So hopefully that'll be a positive coming out of that side. On the other side, Marcus, I see you're benched again.
Yeah, I am. And the irony of this is, lads, as I said to you before, it was actually meant to be Peter Classie on Mick Galwey tonight, but he couldn't make it either, so I've been drafted in again. So I thought it was over all that shit, to be honest with you. Last minute call-ups, whether your man burnt the hand off himself lighting a bonfire or just not feeling up to it today. So I get drafted in.
Captain's runs, Marcus. He always
yeah. That was the thing. I'd do a captain's run, and then I'd ring home to the mother and say, look, I think I could be starting on Saturday because Claude didn't turn up for training. And lo and behold, your man Lazarus would arrive on then fully loaded for the game on Saturday. And Muppet here would get about 5 minutes at the end of the game. And all sorts. Look, history repeating itself, lads. Thanks very much. Confidence is through the roof, really.
There was, I think it was Liam Toland earlier, Gallup. He actually made a good observation saying that because you were picked on the Limerick 15, that you would deliberately have picked a weakened Ireland 15 to make it more likely that you'd come out on top. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I picked a team. I picked a team that would be capable of coming to Thomond Park and and playing there and being used to it. You know what I mean? There's obviously any team you'll ever pick, there's going to be. Let's put it this way, Liam Toland was never going to be on it in case he was disappointed. He got out there first, like, you know what I mean? He'd probably be good for the crack after, all right. I definitely have him there for that. Waterboy, maybe. But he wasn't going to be on the team. I picked a kind of a team, and again, I put a bit of a local interest into it as well. You know what I mean? But it's I'm happy with my team, you know. I'm marking Tom Hale, so, you know, the fact that I picked Tom, I think he'll do me a favour there, so that should be all right.
Can you talk to us a bit about your Earls, Mick? Because it's something that's come up quite a lot.
It has come up, yeah. It has come up an awful lot, and I suppose what a lot of people mightn't understand or remember, I have known your Earls since we played Munster under 18 second row together, so we go back that far. You know what I mean? And that's not today or yesterday. But Jorrells was around at a time that he got a certain amount of caps from Munster. I remember one time he did come to an Irish squad session and you know, he was probably very unlucky. And not alone was he unlucky, I suppose he was unlucky with Munster as well, because, you know, you had all these players coming through, the likes of the Liam Tolands, the Corkeries, the Eddie Halveys, and, you know, the Axels and all these. So he was around at a time when there was a lot of good players, but certainly he was a very consistent player. And yeah, I know there was something said there recently that he was probably one of the unluckiest players not to have got a cap for Ireland because, you know, he's like, you know, for those of us who would have played with him and against him, he was certainly a player that you'd love to have on your team. He was certainly a player that's, you know, that did many exciting things. You know what I mean? And I remember having many battles, particularly with young Munsters down through the years, and just to watch the battle that he maybe be having with Eddie Halvey or somebody like that was amazing just to watch it. And I suppose he had a couple of standout moments, Jorrells, but for me, I remember he came into a Munster team late when we played Australia in '92. Pat O'Hara was injured, and he came in late into that, and he certainly wasn't out of his depth that day. You know what I mean? And he was phenomenal. And again, of course, that was '92, and I think the following year, then in '93, I think '92. Was it '93 that Munsters won their first AIL, and he was very, you know, the try he got in that game, the intercept from Nicky Barry was amazing. So that's the kind of player he was. You know, I know that he'll always be in the shadow of Keith, but certainly Jorrells was to me was a phenomenal player. But should definitely have got more than he got. There's no doubt about that.
You're saying he'd be in the shadow of Keith, but if this game really went ahead and he came off the bench, I'd say he'd take the head off him.
I'd say he would. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be his one opportunity to play in an Irish jersey, and that's why I looked at it as a player like Gerald's deserved to be on that. And yes, even if it was Keith coming down, he would put his body on the line, and it's that kind of stuff that you'd love to see in a game like this, you know.
I remember the lads saying that they like, you know, they'd be driving past. I can't remember which park it was. I think it might have been Shelburne Park or something like that when they were young, and they used to see Keith when he was about 12 or 13 doing the 2x2 tackling drill with his father, and you know, very much hitting him as hard as he could and creasing him. So there's no denying where the ability in that respect came from. Just got to, like, it's obviously, look, we're all Munster men, and we all like to kind of give out about historical bias towards Leinster players and the fact that certain guys were overlooked, and we would still like to do it today to some extent as well. But I mean, was it genuinely a thing in the 80s and 90s? Like, was it a lot harder to get recognition at national level if you were from kind of outside of that Dublin and what was perceived as the IRFU bubble? Yeah,
I certainly think it was. You know what I mean? Like, there was, you know, I remember even when Shannon started going well, you know what I mean? And you know, a player, you know yourself, and this is obviously many years later, but I remember, I can honestly say, from a personal point of view, and I've got the record being dropped more than anybody else, but when Shannon going well in the 90s, we were winning IELTS for fun. I would personally say I was probably playing the best rugby in my career, and yet I never got a start with Ireland. You know what I mean? And when I was nearly gone over the top, I got another 22 or 3 caps. You know what I mean? So, you know, leaking out all that, and the start of professionalism was very tough. But there's no doubt about it. There was certainly a lot of players never got their fair crack. You know what I mean? And players come to mind, the likes of Gerald and the likes of Pat Murray. And, you know, these players were phenomenal players, and they should have got their run and green. You know, there's no doubt about that. Because, you know, but sometimes that worked for us as well. You know, it worked for us when we were playing with Shannon, particularly, and certainly when we were playing with Munster. You know what I mean? Like, we would have looked at the player opposite us and say, look, today I'm going to have to prove myself again, and you do it again and again and again just to prove that you were better than your opposite number. And obviously, in doing that, you were contributing to the team you were playing with. So it was something that drove us on, and certainly something that made us stronger. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, there was certainly a bias back in the day, and it's just something that we had to live with.
Olive, before we came on at the start, and we were looking through the teams, myself and Duncan were chatting, and Duncan would have picked up on a couple of lads. He said, listen, he says, I don't know a huge amount about Eddie Halvey. He said, can you, and like when we spoke to Liam Toland actually picked Eddie out and said, like, there was, you spoke about the competition that was there for Gerald's, and you know, that was like probably the pathway was pretty congested getting into that Munster back row. But for the two of you, for Marcus and for you, Mick, you played with him at Munster and with Ireland and with Shannon. Like, can you just tell us a little bit about him? Because I just remember going to the games and seeing this phenomenal talent.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. Like, you know what, he was the kind of player that you could build your game around. You know what I mean? Like, I remember even with Munster, well, we started first with Shannon, like, where we were launching up at the front of the line out. I wasn't the most agile in the front of the line out when I wasn't this. They'd get up all right, but it maybe took it, but particularly in the opposition ball. I remember, like, when we used to be lifting Halvey, like, you'd throw him up for fun, you know, and it really would. And you can imagine now, and both of you would imagine, trying to get the ball over, you know, someone that's really tall in the front of the line out, it's going to put you off. And it's something that we certainly used Halvey with. But it was just his ball skills. It was everything he had. You know, like, he could kick a ball, he could pass the ball off either side. He was the kind of player you could play in any position, and he was ahead of his time from that point of view. And I suppose what a lot of people won't know, I suppose, is that Eddie Halvey was the first professional player to be I suppose, taken out of Ireland, even before Keith Wood and even before all these great players. Like, Eddie Halvey replaced Francois Pienaar in Saracens that a lot of people wouldn't realise. You know what I mean? And I remember that one of the first. Probably the first Heineken Cup match in Thomond Park, and all the scouts came over. In fairness, at the time, everybody thought they were looking at Axel, but it was Eddie that picked out, and we lost Eddie earlier on, but I know he came back to us. But you know, Saracens, when you think of it, like, and when you weigh it up, Saracens, Francois Pienaar retired, and they replaced him with Eddie Halvey. I think that speaks an amount about it. You know what I mean?
Marcus, moving on to the teams themselves. The front rows, it's kind of an old school versus more new age. And as it was mentioned, you're subbing for the old school. So, what are your thoughts with regard to how the front row has changed over the years with regard to scrummaging? Like before we started recording, we were talking about how like scrums were literally a free for all before, and that's not an exaggeration. But I think people don't realise it was like that until more or less 9-10 years ago. It was pretty lawless. So how do you see the role of the front row having changed kind of in that period?
Yeah, it's changed a huge amount, to be fair. And I think it's changed in the sense that when you talk about the unit, it's the 6 players now rather than the 3. And it's how you, and Fla would probably testify more to this as a forwards coach, is that, when you spring those guys from the bench, they're probably really, really important. So tactically, that has changed. Like I came from a time where there was one prop at the bench. And, so more often than not, he was either a tight head or a loose head. And if he was a tight head, as a loose head, you were playing the 80 minutes, unless you got an injury. So for myself and Hazy, I remember with Shannon and with Munster and even with Ireland, it was a case of you played most of the game. And even just looking at the scrums themselves then as well, when I started out, you were literally taking a run at it. I think everyone's watching the Rugby Gold over the last couple of weeks, and you see the scrums, I described one there recently where I remember myself running to the scrum where the mark was made and didn't even stop or plant my feet, just found with Frankie Sheehan and ran into the scrum. So, you're going out to where it's completely controlled. So it's I'm glad of it. I'm only sorry it didn't come in earlier because when you're going up against an Oz Durant or something that size, it's not easy. One of my big memories of coming into Shannon team, especially, is having that man Mick Galwey behind me. And I remember we played young Munsters, and we would have been up against Paca or something like that, and you could probably smell the drink from fellas from the night before. But all I heard in the first scrum was, "Oh Jesus, Marcus, go handy on me, today." And all I heard from Galwey behind me, "Don't mind that, so and so. There's nothing wrong with him," and he drove me through on top of him. So you have to be wary of guys like that who were trying to pull a fast one. And when you had a pack around you like the Shannon pack, I learned those tricks fairly quick.
Just in terms of wrapping up, lads, and looking at the matchups themselves, Marcus, which team would you give the nod to and why?
I think there's a lot of quality in that Ireland team, but if you put Limerick as the name of the team, in some ways it doesn't really matter who's tagging out. I think there's bitterness, there's anger, there's passion, there's probably hatred. That's it. I think that's enough. There's enough old school there that it's got to be Limerick all the way, So it's an obvious one for me.
And Gallup, for you're a bit conflicted here as a player coach.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's who you're playing with, though, is a lot more important than who you're coaching. So, yeah, from my point of view, I'm very happy with the Limerick team. And Mark, I think Mark has made a good point there. If I remember even a few times that Munster would have played against the rest of Ireland in matches, you know what I mean? And it was huge, and it was a huge drama. Particularly, remember the 1999 World Cup, Marcus? You know what I mean? When the Irish team came down, I know it was in Cork. But
you had a tear in your eye before.
I had a tear in my eye in most matches, but that's the point.
Jesus, I was never so riled up for the game.
Yeah. So I can imagine if reality was reality and this was a Limerick team taking on Ireland, I can imagine that, I suppose, what we wouldn't be calling them and and how we'd build it up. And it would be certainly, we'd be going back to a bit of old school, I think, and passion. But at the same time, I was very much aware of that when I was picking the team. So, there's a lot of players that maybe that feel, or people might feel that other players might have been picked. But for example, I put Peter Manny on the wing, you know what I mean? And people will say, how the hell did he end up in the wing? Well, he played on the wing for Cork, if fellas remember, in the AIL final. And he'd be marking Richie Wallace, and he'd frighten the shite out of Richie. So, that's the simple reason that I put him there. And he'd be like an extra man around the pitch. But then again, as we said, I had someone like Trevor Brennan and Gerald's on the bench. You know what I mean? So when it got fairly tough, you'd be bringing on those lads. But it was amazing when I was looking at the team. And I'm not just saying because Mark, when I was picking the Irish team, I couldn't get over the amount of good lads that were on the Limerick bench. You know what I mean? Like, when you looked at the Limerick bench, God Almighty, I could have picked the whole Limerick bench and then started my Irish team with them, which that's the way it was. But certainly, and maybe it's something to look forward to in the future, and I know you don't want to be particularly, I suppose, in the professional game, but I would love to see a Limerick team take on somebody. Like years ago, we used to have these matches, you know what I mean? North Munster versus South Munster, trial games and God knows what, and I'd love to see that happen again. Even going forward for a charity, a Limerick team in a charity match going forward, I think. I know it would be fantastic because I think you certainly you'd feel torn apart. There's no doubt about that. But looking back, looking at both teams, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of great players. They're not alone known in Munster and Ireland, but they're known all over the world. You know what I mean? And I think we're blessed to be able to pick players like that.
Just one last thing for me, lads. If we were going to do that kind of tactic where it was Leinster or Limerick, boot and bollock, I think we need a good referee that would allow it. So either a Wiry Sexton or a Jimmy Clancy, if you can arrange it, and we'll be sorted.
Absolutely.
Turning out blind eye, if you know what I mean.
Look, thanks very much for joining us. I would just remind everyone that this has all been done to raise funds for some excellent causes in the Limerick region. So the link to donate is in the box. So please donate if you can. Marcus and Galwey, thank you very much, and the very best of luck in this while. Hope you
cheers, boys.
We'll talk to you soon.